Journalists and crew members were on board the flight. Only 6 survived. The team, Chapecoense, was on its way to its biggest game in the club's history, the finals of a South American regional tournament. The aircraft had reported electrical problems shortly before it came down in a mountainous region of Colombia as it approached the city of Medellin. From there, Alim Makboul sent this report.
Plane bringing the players, coaching staff, journalists and 9 crew members was just minutes away from landing when it came down just outside the city of Medellin. Officials were initially optimistic that as many as 30 people had survived. In the end, the more they searched, the more bodies they found. The director of this hospital told me the survivors would now face unimaginable trauma.
The
first was Alain Rachel, who was admitted with spinal injuries and serious cuts. Helio Neto, another footballer, came with severe skull trauma. He's stable and we're looking into how to proceed.
These are images of the Brazilian team Chapecoense taken just last week when they won the semi-final of one of South America's biggest club competitions. The game they were supposed to have played in Colombia would have been the biggest night in the club's history, in what had been a fairy tale season. Instead, back in southern Brazil at the club's headquarters, fans gathered to pray for those of their heroes who'd lost their lives.
For us, we learnt in the early hours of the morning of this very sad event. Unfortunately, the only thing we could do, apart from praying for those who passed away, was to give support to the families who are now in mourning.
Whatever the survivors can tell authorities about the moments leading up to the crash will help investigators. There's currently speculation about electrical problems or lack of fuel, but the focus now is simply on mourning.
Alim Makboul there with that report. Well, I spoke just a few minutes ago to Francisco Bueno Neto, who's a broadcast journalist and long-time resident of Chapeco, the team's home city. He worked with 2 of the journalists who died. He joined me just a few minutes ago, telling me how the community is coping now.
People at the street are sad, are crying, are holding each other's. Many of them are going to the stadium just to show your pain. Shops are closed. Our mayor, called Mr. Luciano Burligon, has decreed 30 days of mourning, and we had no public parties in this time.
Do you know what happened, why this crash happened?
No. We had something about electric failure, and another way, some guys telling about fuel failure. Actually, we know that the plane fly around circles several times, and some guys are expecting that was to plan something or to put through the fuel to make some landing, some forced landing.
Francisco Bueno Neto there. Well, but perhaps because they involve teammates of the same generation, football air disasters seem to have such resonance. In 1949, 18 players of the Torino Football Club were killed along with 13 other people when their plane crashed near Turin, the first such tragedy to strike the world of football. A plane crash at Munich Airport in 1958 killed 23 people, including 8 Manchester United players, their coach and 2 team directors. In 1987, 43 people died when a plane carrying the Alianza Club of Lima went down in the Pacific Ocean. A military aircraft carrying most of the Zambia national team to a World Cup qualifier in 1993 went down in the Atlantic, taking 70 lives. And now the Colombia disaster is the latest in the series of tragedies to strike the beautiful game. Well, we can speak now to another journalist, Brazilian sports journalist Ricardo Satan, who lost two close friends on board the plane. I'm very sorry to hear that. Can you just first of all tell me how you have been feeling today with this terrible news?
It is a day that is not a day. It's been simply as just not believing, because we didn't lose only friends, we lose everything. Because on Sunday we were in the stadium watching Chapecoense playing Palmeiras, just exactly when Palmeiras were crowned the league champions in Brazil. And Chapecoense were there in that pitch, and we interviewed almost all of them. And in that plane, we had also 21 journalists. 21 are simply gone.
Tell me about your two friends who were on that flight and all the people that you knew who were involved with the club.
Yeah, personally, I had a player who was very close to me, Kleber Santana, who played in Atletico Madrid with De Gea and other famous players. He has a big experience national team. He played for Santos, Sao Paulo, and he passed away. My personal friends were Vitorino Schermont, an amazing reporter who used to work for Global TV and recently worked for Fox News, and he was a veteran with 5 World Cups. But together with him, there was a pundit called Paulo Julio Clement, who was someone of very special views in football, and he was a journalist from the written press and television, and we've been together in 4 World Cups.
How much did
By their side, there was also...
Sorry to interrupt you. I know it's very difficult. Just tell me how much the team means to the people who live in this town. What sort of place is this as well?
You're talking about a town of 210,000 people, a town that had never had any joy in any sport. The maximum they could do is applaud the famous tennis player Guga Kirten, who was from the same state of Santa Catarina. Santa Catarina is a small state in Brazil, and suddenly that town of Chapecó, with 210,000 people, started to see 7 years ago that team, supported by local industries, just going high. And that Cinderella story that everybody's saying is truth, because they have reached the high level of the first division in Brazil, and they were never in danger of the relegation. And now, just a day or two before a final of an international cup, after eliminating strong opponents, it's hard to cope. It's very hard to cope.
I'm sure. Many thanks indeed for your time, Ricardo Satan. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Obviously, we send our condolences to everyone there. Now, there are reports that so-called Islamic State militants in Mosul have been killing civilians as the battle for control of the area intensifies. It's 6 weeks since the Iraqi army launched an offensive to retake the city, Islamic State's last major stronghold in Iraq. While around 74,000 people have been displaced so far, the UN estimates around half of those are children. Around 36,000 people have arrived at the nearby Qaza refugee camp. Our correspondent Ola Guerin has been hearing the story of one family. I must warn you that our report does contain some very distressing images of children.
The endless ranks of the dispossessed, those who fled Mosul now stranded in the sands. This is Hazar camp. Every day there are 1,000 new arrivals. And among the countless victims of IS here, some barely clinging to life. This is Hussein, who's 2.5. He cries constantly, relatives say, from hunger pains. And nearby, his brother Hassan, 9 years old and severely malnourished. Their mother, Manal, says the boys were healthy until 18 months ago, when they were ravaged by a high fever and sudden illness. She doesn't know the cause. The family couldn't afford a good doctor, and in the past month they couldn't get food and water. They were rescued by the Iraqi army last week, but she says in her eyes, her treasured sons are already gone. Her husband Ahmed told me he pleaded with IS repeatedly to let him get help for his children. He says they beat his fingers with a hammer, tried to pull out his nails and threatened to kill him. We are concealing his identity because he still has relatives in Mosul. Hassan's grandfather says the boy chews his fingers to ease his hunger. He used to be a chubby little character, he says, before breaking down. After we alerted the camp authorities, they brought help for the first time since the family arrived 5 days ago. Along with the mattresses and food, hope of medical attention.
They need a quick, urgent action taken for the treatment, so they need to be somewhere in the hospital, in the special hospital. They need a special treatments.
This should be an emergency.
Exactly.
For the trip to the camp clinic, no ambulance, just a private car. There's no indication of mass malnutrition in Mosul, but this family says IS condemned their sons to waste away. Orla Guerin, BBC News, Northern Iraq.
Orla Guerin there with Hussein and his brother Hassan in a refugee camp near Mosul. Let's have a look now at some of the day's other news. And the US President-elect Donald Trump has chosen as health secretary an outspoken critic of President Obama's health care law. If confirmed by the Senate, Tom Price, a congressman from Georgia and a former surgeon, would play a central role in Republican plans to replace Obamacare. South Korea's President Park Geun-hye has said that she will resign if Parliament comes up with a plan for the safe transfer of power. President Park has been embroiled in a high-level corruption scandal. At the weekend, tens of thousands of South Koreans demonstrated for her to go. The leaders of Cuba's global allies have been arriving for a rally to pay tribute to the revolutionary leader Fidel Castro. The Venezuelan and Bolivian presidents Nicolas Maduro and Evo Morales are among those who will attend the ceremony. The Cuban president, Raul Castro, is expected to address the crowd at Havana's Revolution Square. Now, Italy's Prime Minister Matteo Renzi may end up as the latest centrist politician to be blown away by the tide of popular anger that we seem to be seeing. At the weekend, the country votes on his plan to streamline the way the country is run. But there is a good chance that he could lose, prompting Mr. Renzi to quit and Italy's shaky banks to come under pressure. He's been talking to our Europe editor, Katia Adler, in Rome.
The Italian parliament, sumptuous, but also bloated and exorbitant. More expensive to run than the French, German, UK and Spanish parliaments altogether. With many Italians struggling just to get by, such excess provokes a lot of resentment. Italy's reform-minded Prime Minister is holding a referendum this Sunday to change all that, he says. So should be an easy win for him, right? Wrong, as I put it to him at the start of his campaign.
You sitting here, you are part of that establishment. The risk is Italians may just vote against you as part of what they see as an elite.
This is a risk. It's a clear risk. But this constitutional reform reduces the red tape of bureaucracy, gives stability to Italian institutions, and solve the problem of a relation between central government and the local authorities.
In fact, Sunday's referendum has become all about Prime Minister Renzi, who came to government 2 years ago promising to change Italy or change jobs. Voters in hard-up Sicily told us they're itching to deliver their Renzi verdict. We're going backwards. We're in crisis, this couple told me. Even the boatloads of illegal migrants who land here are better off than us Sicilians.
Ours is a life of sacrifice, while politicians have mountains of money. They forget about the poor, about us.
And it's not just in Sicily and the south. Wherever you travel across Italy, you grab your coffee, you chat to people. They say they're angry, frustrated and worried about the future.
It's a mixture of a stagnant economy, stifling bureaucracy, regional corruption, bad debt in the banks, and huge debt at national government level. It means that Italians feel they're not getting the schools, the hospitals, and quality of life they deserve. Billions of euros worth of bad debt in Italian banks, the second largest government debt to GDP rate in the European Union after Greece. I mean, that doesn't look good.
We inherited an economy which has lost as much as 10 percentage points of GDP, was in deep recession. Now the economy is growing. We need more, especially for the weaker segments of the population.
Italy is one of Europe's most influential nations, the Eurozone's third largest economy. A no vote here this Sunday could cost more than a Prime Minister's career, sending economic and political shockwaves far beyond Italy's borders at a time of international instability. Katia Adler, BBC News, Rome.
Well, with me is Wolfgango Piccoli, co-president of the political consultancy Teneo Intelligence. Do you think Mr. Renzi is going to lose this? And if so, what's that going to mean?
Our baseline is that he's going to lose the referendum. He will then resign. There will be a period of political consultation. A caretaker government will be created. Whether it's going to be a Renzi second or not, it doesn't really matter. The mandate of this government will be very narrow to take the country to early election, but before we need to change the electoral system. Are
people voting on the referendum proposals, or is it, as Katia said, really just a vote of no confidence in on how they feel right now?
It is a vote on Renzi. It is partially Renzi's fault. Before the summer, he personalized it. He tried to backtrack. It was too late. This is a vote on the government. The matter of the referendum is extremely complex, and therefore there is still a very good amount of public here that still don't understand what this referendum is about.
If he does lose, if there is a change politically, what is that going to mean financially? Because there's been a lot of nervousness about the banks.
Yes. Well, the banks will be the first channel of transmission. They've already been whacked over from the beginning of the year. It will complicate some of the ongoing matters like the recapitalization of Monte dei Paschi and so on. But it's not going to be a major drama. Let's be very clear about that. Politically and economically, this is an important referendum and not a game changer. The problem here is that the political trajectory of the country will not improve, and with it, the economy certainly is not likely to improve either.
What is the impact of that on Europe in a wider sense?
It will be another kind of signal that centrist parties are struggling to hold. But apart from that, there is not going to be shockwaves beyond Italy. We are still in an environment where the ECB is doing quantitative easing. They will extend it soon, most likely until the end of 2017. So the overall impact is going to be fairly limited, mainly through on the equity market, mainly targeting banks more than anything else.
What about this five-star movement? We've seen groups like the Northern League. I mean, how much is there that disconnect that we've seen in other parts of Europe and in the US, of course?
The five-star movement, the Northern League, this anti-establishment party, whatever you want to label them, they will benefit out of a no win, essentially on Sunday. Are they going to be able to win the next election? Most likely not, because the electoral system will be conceived in a way that will make their life difficult.
Wolfgango Piccoli, we got through a lot. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Now, an impressive feat of engineering has been unveiled at Chernobyl in Ukraine, the site of the world's worst ever civil nuclear disaster. A giant shield-like structure has been moved over the nuclear reactor, where an explosion in 1986 caused a cloud of radioactive material to escape into the air. Tom Burridge went to see the new shield and sent this report.
It is structurally phenomenal. Hundreds of engineers have tried to figure out how to build this kind of structure in such a radiologically contaminated area. It is a big achievement. I'm very proud right now. In fact, I'm very emotional today, I have to admit it.
Think of this structure as a giant shield. It is big enough to cover St Paul's Cathedral in London. It is now sitting over a nuclear reactor, the site of the world's worst ever nuclear accident back in 1986. And still inside the old reactor here is a huge amount of highly dangerous radioactive material.
It's necessary because it shields the environment from any contamination, the winds and the rain cannot blow out. It is safe. It seems to me that this is like closing a nuclear wound for the whole world.
Tourists can come here. It's safe if you spend a limited amount of time. But there is a 30-kilometre exclusion zone around this whole area, including the nuclear plant nearby, because much of the ground here is still contaminated.
Tom Burridge with that report. The Italian woman who is thought to be the world's oldest person and the last person alive to be born in the 1800s has celebrated her 117th birthday. Emma Morano was born in November 1899, 4 years before the Wright brothers first took to the air. Her life has spanned 3 centuries, 2 world wars and over 90 Italian governments. Might see another one in by the way she's going. Despite the smiles, she says her life had been tough, facing an abusive husband and having to work in a factory until she was 65. Her secret to a long life? Well, she swears by a diet of 2 raw eggs every day. Now we know. The actor Tom Hiddleston has told the BBC of his heartbreak over the conflict in South Sudan following a visit to the country. The peace deal agreed last year has collapsed and South Sudan is now entering its 4th year of a bitter civil war. Well, Tom Hiddleston is a UNICEF ambassador with a brief to raise the plight of children in the country. 3.2 million children there have been affected by the civil war, and he told my colleague Matthew Amroliwala that children are especially vulnerable when separated from their families.
If you run from a city because it's unsafe, you run into the bush and there's no water there, there's no food, there are certainly no schools, and you become vulnerable to forced recruitment from local militia, which have risen up as the country's become more unstable. So young boys are at risk of becoming recruited as child soldiers. Young girls become recruited as well to serve as slaves or cooks. And that is, no child should have to go through that.
Being famous, one of the great things about that must be doing the work that you do in South Sudan, but it's the flip side, you know, all of the coverage, you had that breakup with Taylor Swift, to have millions, gazillions of people pouring all over your personal life. I mean, how do you navigate that?
Honestly, I try to keep my attention outward. That's how I navigate it.
Difficult though?
Well, I'm not in control of anyone else's opinion of me. It's a long time ago I had to give that up. I can only control my own actions. And what I do and what I say, and in a way I take comfort in that.
And it's possible, is it, to just shunt the rest of it to one side, as you're suggesting? That's possible, you can do that?
It takes a little getting used to, but yeah, I'm not the first and I shan't be the last.
Tom Hiddleston, actor and UNICEF ambassador. Here in Britain, the recently introduced £5 note has won many fans since it was launched in September. It's tough, it doesn't tear, you can spill beer on it, put it through the washing machine and it'll survive. But one thing it turns out it's not is fat-free, because it seems the plastic polymer it's made from also contains small amounts of tallow, which is derived from animal waste products. And some vegetarians and vegans are not happy. So far, over 5,000 people have signed a petition calling for the contents of the notes to be changed. I just spent my last one. I'm not sure how I feel about that either. Let me know. I'm on Twitter @Geetha Gurumurthy if you've got a view on that. We've got the weather coming up and I'm back with the headlines. See you soon. Thanks for watching.